All right, so we're back to another episode of the Northridge Sports Podcast. This is your host, Mike Robinson, and this is basically part two of the video I just did. So I just talked about the All-Star game and things that I think that would improve it a little bit. But also, I want to talk about a couple other fun things. So I'm recording this one same day, but I'll probably save it and release it the following day, just so that people can kind of like catch the first one first, and then maybe follow up with this one afterwards. So I want to at least give it a day or two before I release this one. But just so you know, if you notice, like, why do I look the exact same? It's because I'm recording these back to back. But let me pause for a second. All right. Luckily, I found out how to pause my video, so when I get a little kid interruption, I can I can just pause it instead of just like continuing on. And I'm like, forget about editing this out. But anyway, so I want to talk about a couple other fun topics that's interesting to me. So basically, I was thinking the other day, what are the best or what are the greatest NBA teams of all time? A lot of people talk about the GOAT debate between who's the greatest player of all time. And for probably the vast majority of people, it's between one of two players. It's between Jordan or LeBron James. And for some people, they do have Jordan. It's mostly old heads. That would include myself. I guess I'm a little bit of an old head, and I definitely it's kind of close for me between the two, but I have a slight, favor to Jordan. It may be biased, but I think Jordan, to me, still has like the strongest case for being just the greatest player. In addition to having a very, very impressive resume to go along with it, the legacy, the story behind, Jordan's career. To me, it's like LeBron's like, man, he's right up there with them. So I'm not mad at anybody who has LeBron number one. I kind of flip-flop myself a little bit, but early on, like some years ago, back in like the mid 20-teens, I still had LeBron not even top 5 for me. You know what I mean? Because when I looked at like the accolades and the things that people had done up to that point, LeBron wasn't quite there yet for me. And then I think like within a short span after that, LeBron won with the Cavaliers back in 2016. I believe that was 2016. That Cavaliers win where he beat that 73-9 Golden State Warrior team. I mean that was enough to put him like number 2 to me, number 2, number 3. But he's done a lot more since then, and he's still like the ink ain't dry on his legacy yet. LeBron's still playing. But anyway. A lot of people kind of discuss, not just their GOAT debate, but a lot of people will give you a top 5 or even a top 10 players of all time. At one point in time, I had created a list where, initially I was doing top 5, kind of extended out to top 10. When I did top 10, there was a bunch of players that I was kind of deciding, like, do they belong in the top 10 or are they just outside the top 10, which made me go to 15. Then I kind of was like, okay, well, what are the next best players after that? And I kind of extended the list to 25, and then I went all the way to 50 at one point. Now, this was many years ago. I probably want to kind of redo the list now, because some things have probably changed. Some players that were in the NBA between 5 to 10 years ago have done a little bit more to add to their legacy since then, and that kind of changes where players kind of wind up on the list for me. At one point in time, Steph Curry was outside the top 10. Now I think he belongs in the top 10 players of all time. So I'll probably redo that list. But I thought something else interesting would be to discuss, like, what are the greatest teams of all time? What is the number one best team of all time? or what is the top 5 teams of all time? So while I was thinking about this, I kind of came up with a list like, well, what do I think is the greatest teams of all time? And am I judging it strictly on how many championships that specific team with their main core of players, how many championships did they win? What was their records, their win-loss records? How many points did they put up? Were they strong offensively, defensively? Kind of like look at the individual players and kind of stack them up and give them a value in totality. You know what I mean? So I thought about this for a while, and honestly, the first first 3 or 4 teams wasn't really hard to pick, but I kind of once I got to 5, I was kind of like, there's a couple other teams I kind of think should be in it. So I was like, again, similar to where I'm picking like my top 10 players of all time. I end up with like 13, 14 players that I'm kind of deciding between, do they belong in top 10 or not. And so that kind of extended me to 15 players. Similarly, I kind of like, in an attempts to make a top 5 list, I ended up making a top like 8 list. And then I said, you know what, let me just add 2 more teams and make it top 10. So I came up with the top 10 teams of all time. And then I got something a little creative to go along with it. But I first want to discuss the teams that I think are the top 10 teams of all time. Number 1 for me is Jordan Bulls. Now, I already think that Jordan is arguably the best player of all time, if not number 2 to LeBron James. And a lot of it has to do with his impressive number of wins through the entire 90s. I mean, listen, Jordan was a phenomenal player leading up to the 90s, but he was getting beat out by the Pistons and the Celtics, right? In the East. He finally gets a win in 91. Makes it to the finals, beats the Lakers in 1991. He goes back in 92, then back in 93. I mean, people already thought he was a phenomenally great player before he even made it to a championship. After he won and then got that three-peat, there was no question who the best player in the world was. And had he not retired, most people feel like, man, we're just going to see the Bulls go back to back to back to back. I almost even think the league had to tell Jordan to retire. Take a break. Go play baseball. Go golf if you want to. Gamble. Do whatever. You always got a spot that you could come back. But man, dude, like no one's winning a championship if you're in the league, because he has a never say die attitude. He has a never quit spirit. His will to win is second to none. That's what made Jordan great. Now, Jordan wins 3 championships, 91, 92, 93. He retires. Doesn't play at all in 94. Now, technically, he played in 95, but he was retired the majority of the year. This man came back after All-Star break. Late in the season, right before the playoffs. He gets thrown in after not playing basketball for I don't know how long. Well over a year. Maybe a little bit in his spare time, but not professionally in the NBA. Comes back, still proves that he's the man by like scoring, crazy points in games, like he never left. But that team chemistry was a little bit off, and they faced a really, really tough young Orlando Magic with Shaq and prime Penny Hardaway. They lost that series. That's technically, on Jordan's record that he didn't make it to the finals that year. But a lot of people, when they look at that, they don't really count it, because Jordan barely played that season. He came back late as hell in 95 just to play in the playoffs. And so, a lot of people don't count that against them. Give Jordan a full year with the team, and he ain't losing. He proved it, because he came back in 96, won the 96 championship, won the 97 championship, won the 98 championship. He went back-to-back 2 3-peats. And if we're not counting 94 and 95, a lot of people view it as Jordan won like 6 straight. Technically, they weren't 6 years in a row, but if you looked at each full season that he played, and you're only counting the full seasons that Jordan played in the NBA, he won 6 championships in a row. He didn't go to 6 finals. He won 6 finals. Every finals he appeared in, he won. He was 6-0 in finals. Mind you, he didn't go to the finals every year of his career, but throughout the 90s, there's a strong argument that had he not retired, he could have won the entire 90s. The entire 90s could have been all Jordan Bulls. Now we can't say, well, maybe what if, whatever. But I think anybody just got any amount of basketball sense can see Jordan wasn't losing in the 90s. He just wasn't gonna lose. And had he stayed with that team, that team stayed intact under his leadership. I mean, we don't have a time machine to find out, but I bet Jordan would not have lost in the 90s. And if you saw The Last Dance, you know that the team owner wanted to break that team up. The wildest thing ever. You want to get rid of the greatest player of all time, their coach. You want to break that team up for what? For what? They're winning at a historically crazy level. This has to be conspiracy level of like wildness. Like the commissioner had to be behind getting rid of that team. Because no other team there was going to be zero parity in the league if Jordan stayed in it. Just like Jordan retired the first time, I think he might have had a conversation with David Stern. I don't know. The commissioner probably said, "Hey man, somebody else got to win. You can't just win them all. 3's enough." They let him come back and win 3 more, and they probably say, "Hey, look, man, you don't have to sit down because the history of our league is just going to be all Jordan, and there's going to be nothing else when you're gone." I don't know. That's my little conspiracy mind thinking, but if you want to say anything's rigged, they told Jordan don't play. You know what I'm saying? If there's any amount of rigging going on from the commissioner, it had to have been that he told Jordan do not play in order to save the league. Because yes, you're great, but when you're gone, we want fans to still have something worth watching. So we got to make it seem like somebody else has the chance to win, and create some parity. Basically, people like parity. I think people like greatness, but I think there's an equal amount of people that value parity. In the NBA. But anyway, not to make this too long, I gotta make my case for the number 1 team of all time. But to me, it's that Jordan Bulls. That 90s Bulls has such an impressive run. I don't know if anybody will ever do it like that again. Barely anybody's ever getting back-to-backs, let alone a three-peat. So Jordan got 2 of them with that Bulls team. So to me, Jordan Bulls, number 1 team of all time. Not a too distant second. I mean, they're close to they're close to being number 1 really, but to me it's a close second. And that's the Golden State Warriors. Some people might feel like they're the greatest team of all time. Some people might feel like if you take that Jordan Bulls team and you take the Warriors and you face them off in a final series, that the Warriors would win. I'm not so sure about that. Do I think the collection of talent as a whole appears to be better with the Warriors? They for sure have the better offensive team as a whole. There's no question about that. I think it'd be extremely hard to guard that combination of players. And when I say the Warriors, yeah, they won a little bit before Kevin Durant got there, but I'm putting that Kevin Durant team as the best Warriors team, including KD in the lineup. Because they were already great, and then they added another, all-time great player with Kevin Durant. Very, very unstoppable, very unguardable. When you include him in that Warriors offense, it's like, how are you really stopping Kevin Durant and that team as a whole? So, you know, there's a case for them to be the number one team of all time, but just based off of their record and their longevity, they didn't do it as long as the Bulls. So, you know, I'm gonna put them at number two. But the Golden State Warriors with Steph and KD. Number three for me is Shaq and Kobe Lakers. That Shaq and Kobe Lakers team was a dominant force to be reckoned with. And yes, Kobe was young. His game wasn't at its peak yet, but he was very, athletic, ambitious, had a will to win. He was locking in on the defensive end of the court. He very much played hard as a two-way player. Maybe he wasn't the best defender of all time, but he was pretty tough on defense, and he definitely put in a lot of effort on the defensive end, just as well as he gave guys buckets on the offensive end. And that young Kobe with the number 8 rocking the fro, Froby was nice like that. And that wasn't even the best player on the team. The best player on that Shaq and Kobe Lakers teams was Shaq. Shaq was dominant. Shaq was getting in the post, breaking backboards and backs every time he went to the rim and dunked. Shaq was something nice and nasty at the same time. Wasn't nobody guarding Shaq. And I don't know if there's anybody in the history of the league that's going to stop prime Shaquille O'Neal. He was too big, he was too strong, and he was athletic. And in his peak, he was fast too. Could you imagine this big old 300-some pound monster with Superman muscles just dunking on there? Like, oh, come on, man. No wonder the rims needed to be reinforced. No wonder they needed to go from a glass backboard that was going to shatter to something that was indestructible, bulletproof material. They had to stop the Superman from breaking everything out there, man. Like he was going to put the game on pause. They had to have a backup rim in the back just in case. Every time Shaq played, Shaq was something nasty, man. Shaq was nice. So prime Shaq, yeah, it was Kobe on the younger end, but that was a great combination. And you could just imagine if that team would have stayed together longer, what would they have done? Now they had a little rift between them. Shaq kind of started getting lazy. I mean, nobody was beating that Lakers team. The Lakers beat themselves. That's the only reason they stopped winning championships. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're the last three-peat that's ever been in the NBA. In the early 2000s. I don't think there's been a three-peat since then. There's been some back-to-backs. There's been guys that been to a bunch of finals, like LeBron. He's been more than a half a dozen straight finals, but he ain't win more than one or two in a row. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard to get a three-peat. You got to be excellent. You got to be next level good in a league where there's guys that are competing and constructing their team specifically to beat you. Once you win one and then you win two back to back, you're public enemy number one. You got the biggest target on your back. Every team is game planning, watching film, trying to come up with a strategy to beat you. They're constructing their teams to beat you. It's hard to stay on top. Very hard to stay on top. But that's Shaq and Kobe Lakers. They would have had they not broken up that team. So, and yeah, I think that their front office probably kind of messed around with some stuff chemistry wise. Because, yeah, I mean, that team where they added like Karl Malone and I think Gary Payton and whatever, like, that's just too much. That's just too many guys together. Like, you need guys that are role players. I firmly believe that too many star players is a clash. You don't need more than one or two stars. Somebody got to ride in the back seat, and be a role player. You got too many clashing stars. That's going kind of the chemistry's not going to mesh well. But anyway, Shaq and Kobe Lakers number 3. For me, man, when you see what's number 5 and below that, you might question why aren't those guys higher. But I'm gonna explain that in a second. But number 4, I put Duncan Spurs. Now, you could look at Duncan's entire career as a whole, Not just the finals he won, because you know Duncan has 5 championships. I might be wrong on that, but last I checked, if I remember correctly, Duncan has like 5 rings. Not to mention he's been to the finals even more times than he's got rings. There's a slight case. I don't think Duncan's better than LeBron. But if people are giving LeBron so much credit just because he's been to the finals, look at how many times Tim Duncan has been to the finals and has won. And then when he wasn't in the finals, this man was in like Western Conference finals and like having deep playoff pushes every single year. Not to mention a pretty good regular season record every single year. Duncan was Duncan was like he's a top 10 player for a reason. Duncan was something nice, man. And as a team, he always had a very complimentary team around him. He was always competing. Um, so I mean, it's just the consistency of success and greatness. Duncan as a player in that franchise, I mean, they're a little quieter team. They weren't the loudest, most flashy, look at me superstar type of players, but they got the job done so consistently. It's you cannot argue against Duncan's greatness as a player and his teams overall. The Duncan Spurs was to me like you got to put them in that top 5 conversation for best teams of all time. And honestly, if you put them head to head with a lot of these other teams, I think they beat a lot of teams on the list below them. In my opinion, would they beat the Bulls, the Golden State Warriors, Shaq and Kobe Lakers? Probably not. I wouldn't bet against those teams, but any other team outside of them top 3, I think Duncan Spurs beats out just about any other team in NBA history. If you were able to put them up together in a final series. So number 5 is the Showtime Lakers. Magic, Kareem, James Worthy, Byron Scott. That whole Showtime Lakers, they pretty much ran the 80s. Damn near every year they were winning the finals, winning a championship, or they were in it. Damn near the entire 80s. And even at the beginning of the 90s. Jordan's very first championship that he won was against the Lakers in 91 with Magic Johnson. And I think just the year prior to that, what is it, the Bad Boy Pistons. I don't know if it was 1990, but I think it was 89. The Bad Boy Pistons won one of their championships against that Lakers squad. I think they beat out another team the following year or something like that, but then the year prior to the Bad Boy Pistons winning, the Pistons was in the finals and they got beat by the Lakers in '88. So, I mean, dude, like there was a lot of championships won. Magic Johnson won 5 championships in his career, which was shortened due to his HIV situation, whatever. And I think he still came back for a little bit after that and gave teams buckets. Like Magic Johnson was really the man in my opinion. One of the greatest players. But you can't forget about Kareem. Kareem was dominant. There's a reason why it took so long for somebody to break his all-time scoring scoring list or whatever. LeBron finally won it, but man, look how many seasons LeBron had to play in order to beat Kareem's all-time points record. Kareem was just so unstoppable offensively. Obviously he had the skyhook move. That was a very unstoppable move that he mastered and perfected or whatever. But Kareem just all around as a player was crafty. He was big. He was athletic for a lot of years until he kind of reached his later years in his career. But But Kareem was phenomenal of a player, and to have him on the Lakers as well, like that team was a very very tough team to guard and a very tough team to stop. You know, they had consistent greatness throughout the Showtime era. So I got them number five on my list. But again, as great as they were, I do think Shaq and Kobe, in terms of Lakers squads, I think Shaq and Kobe would beat them. I think that Shaq and Kobe team would actually beat that Showtime Laker team. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a tough battle, but I think they would win. And same for the other teams I put above them on the list. But number six, I put Bad Boy Pistons. In my opinion, the Bad Boy Pistons at their peak, at their prime, I know it was short lived, but they were a dominant force to be reckoned with. They roughed young Jordan up something bad. You know what I'm saying? And they were a tough, competitive team. Hard nosed, hustle, play defense. I was talking to another person the other day. I think that Bad Boys team, yeah, they get labeled as a dirty team, and yes, they would resort to playing dirty if they had to. That was the mentality of the 80s. It wasn't just the Pistons. I mean, the Celtics, the whole East was rough and rugged. If you was playing in the East back in the 80s, you had to be rough or you weren't going to make it out of the East. You had to be willing to fight and scrap if you had to, because that was the mentality and the culture at that time. Was no blood, no foul. Definitely no flagrant. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they were going to put everything on the line and fight to win. But I still think, despite that reputation and that culture of the 80s and the 90s quite a bit, they were smart players. If you really look at and break down the defensive schemes and the way they played as a team, they were actually a better and smarter defensive team than any one of those individual players were individually defensively talented. And don't get me wrong, that Pistons team had some good defensive players, but collectively as a team, they played great as a unit, and they hustled. They played hard every possession, every play, and that's what led them to their success. So I think they're number six to me. They were able to beat out the Celtics at the tail end of the 80s. I know Larry Bird's back kind of gave out on them, but man, I think the Pistons broke that back before Larry Bird's back gave out on his own. Like I think the Pistons put some work on them. So they beat up that young Bulls team, beat up the Celtics, and went to the finals and beat out the Lakers and won back-to-back championships. As the Detroit Pistons, and I think they went to at least 3 finals in that span. And I know it was a short window, but there's no doubt about it. Their name fits. They were the baddest team maybe in NBA history. So Bad Boys is fitting, and I don't know if there'll ever be another NBA team quite like them. But so I'm putting them number 7 or number 6 on my list. Number 7, I got the Bird Celtics, and this was a tough one, man, because it's arguable that the Celtics deserve to be above the Pistons, maybe even above the Lakers, but I think very few people would put the Celtics in the 80s above the Lakers, because I think between the Bird and Magic matchup, I think there's a consensus that if they weren't nearly equal, if you had to pick a winner, I think you pick Magic over Bird in terms of the winner of the 80s. Because they went back to back to back so many times to finals. And I know there were some other teams that kind of sprinkled their way in there in the 80s, but majority of the 80s was that Boston Celtics team or that Showtime Lakers team, and Celtics deserve to be in the conversation for one of the greatest teams of all time. If you look at their record of consistent greatness, there's no doubt about it that they were a phenomenally great team. The only reason why I don't rate them higher is because I personally think that the teams I have listed above them, if they were to match up head to head, those other teams would beat them. I'm picking the Bulls over them. I mean, 90s prime Bulls when Jordan had Pippen. When Jordan had Pippen and a nice team around him, Jordan wasn't losing. Jordan wasn't losing in the 90s. So, and I don't think he'd lose to too much anybody ever, including that Boston team. You know, Warriors. I mean, a lot of the younger generation, they're gonna for sure side with the Warriors beating everybody of all time. I don't know. But I do think they beat that Celtics team. Shaq and Kobe Lakers. Again, I put the Shaq and Kobe Lakers over the Showtime Lakers. If they would have matched up head to head, I mean, I think Shaq and Kobe would get it done. It's mostly because of Shaq, honestly. It's mostly because of Shaq. But Kobe was good, and then their role players around him, they had good shooters, pretty much at every other position outside of Shaq and Kobe. So, you know, you double somebody else is knocking down a shot. There's a reason why Robert Horry is Big Shot Bob, because you were scared, shaking in your boots when Shaq got the ball. So somebody was gonna get open. Somebody was gonna get open because you got to double team Shaq. So somebody's getting open, and they had those shooters on the team. Kobe liked to take the last shot, but you know, I mean, you put it in Robert Horry's hands, you put it in Rick Fox's hands, you put it in Derek Fisher's hands. They're gonna knock down threes, man. They're gonna knock down shots. So, you know, that was a team ahead of its time, and with a player that we've almost never seen since. I do think there's a player today that to me kind of is the closest thing to Shaq, but you know, Shaq for his era, he was unstoppable, and of all time, I don't think there's no one quite like Shaq. But so yeah, Birds, Celtics, number 7. Number 8, this is interesting. Number 8 for me is any team LeBron's been on. Now, I know for super LeBron fans, this is blasphemy. This is blasphemy. How could a player that a lot of people today think LeBron is the greatest player of all time, and if you don't have him number 1, you'd be out of your mind not to have him number 2. Again, I'm not mad if people think he's number 1. I may flip flop my decision by the end of LeBron's career. We'll see, but LeBron's arguably number 1. How could his team? How could he have the 8th best team of all time? Well, that's just because I think there's other teams that's just better. There's just other teams that are better, not players, but teams that are better. LeBron is great individually. As you've seen, he's carried trash teams before. We're calling them trash, but teams that just weren't very good collectively. That's been a lot of his teams, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, he's played with Dwayne Wade, he's played with Chris Bosh, he played with Kyrie, he played with Kevin Love, and his latest, you know, team that won with the Lakers in the bubble, mind you, but you know, he played with Anthony Davis. He's played with some good talent, and now he's got Luka. Luka might carry him to another championship. We'll see, but LeBron has had some talent, but I think top to bottom, if you compare them player for player to the greatest teams of all time, I think he comes up just slightly short to all these teams. And honestly, the difference between the number 1 team of all time and the number 8 team is like splitting hairs. It's like splitting. I mean, the number 1 team, whether you think the Bulls or the Warriors, them versus the number 8 team, it ain't that much of a difference. The fact that, again, a lot of people will probably put the Warriors number 1. The fact that LeBron beat that team, mind you, it was before KD got to the Warriors. But I mean, I don't know, the way that they played, the way that they rallied back from being down, um, you know, 3-1 or whatever. I'm not sure anybody in front of them was gonna stop them. Was gonna stop that team. That team was locked in, and they were determined to win. So, and LeBron's great, no doubt. I think Kyrie is great. But then this is the next question. So I put any LeBron team as number 8, any LeBron team. But if you had to answer the question of which of LeBron's teams that have been to the finals and won the championship, which of those teams do you think was the best LeBron team? Do you think the Lakers? LeBron's a little older. I don't think that was the best cast necessarily, cast of players, but they were pretty good. Do you think that Cleveland Cavaliers team, because they were tough, only team stopping them was that Warriors team. They were rolling through the East, making it to the finals every year, just couldn't beat that Warriors team. They beat them once though, so you got to give them credit. So then does that mean that Cavaliers team was the greatest team of all time, or do you think the Miami Heat team? Man, honestly, again, this is splitting hairs. It's really tough to call it on what team you think is the best, but by a slight favorite, I'm gonna go with the Miami Heat team, and it's for a couple reasons. Reason number one is I think the number 2 to LeBron, which was Dwayne Wade, and damn near arguably Bosh, but Dwayne Wade I think was like arguably the best number 2, or I'd say the best guard. Between him and Kyrie, which one do you think is better, Kyrie or Dwayne Wade? I'm giving Dwayne Wade a slight advantage over Kyrie just because he's more of a two-way player. He plays both ends of the court. He can give you buckets on offense. Very clutch. Very consistent. Very efficient player. Athletic, strong. You know what I'm saying? He can score in a variety of ways. He can facilitate a bit, but he could also play defense. He can also lock up on the defensive end of the court. He's one of the best defensive guards of all time. He literally leads the all-time record in blocks at the guard position. Blocks. That's impressive. Blocks from the guard position. Point guards and shooting guards, they don't typically get a lot of blocks. They get steals. They don't typically get that many blocks. For Dwayne Wade to lead all time in blocks from the guard position, that's impressive. That's impressive. I think he got a pretty decent amount of steals in his prime as well. So he was a pretty solid lockdown defender. Kyrie, better offensively, yes. Better shooter, better ball handler, better passer, facilitator, whatever, better playmaker. Kyrie is nice. On offense, he's pretty unguardable, right? Pretty unguardable. Better offensive player than Dwayne Wade, but Dwayne Wade's a much better defensive player than Kyrie. So I say that team that LeBron had in Miami was better because of Dwayne Wade. And Bosh, I think Bosh is better than what's his name? Better than Kevin Love, and that's only a slight favorite in my opinion. I only put Bosh slightly above of Kevin Love because Kevin Love was really good, but Bosh compared to Anthony Davis, I think Anthony Davis is probably a more talented player all around. I think he's better for sure. When Anthony Davis is playing and at his best, he's for sure a better player than Chris Bosh. But it's like Chris Bosh is so reliable. He was such a reliable player, such a solid all around player, and just consistent, and I know he ended up with the blood clots later on in his career, which he couldn't help, but just a medical condition he couldn't help. But outside of that, he wasn't really injury prone. So I don't know, man. Give me Chris Bosh over Anthony Davis, just due to reliability. I think Bosch might not be as talented, but he's so good while also being very reliable. I think you got to kind of give it to Bosch for Bron's big men. So as a whole, yeah, I'm picking that Miami team as LeBron's best team, and that's not even discussing was LeBron at his best in Miami. I think you could say Cleveland Bron, especially before like that last year or two maybe. But you could argue that whole stretch in Cleveland. I think that might have been LeBron's best all around skill as a player. Because he started to be able to shoot a little better, especially from three, and he always had like good IQ, but I think it was like next level when he was in Cleveland. So his basketball IQ just kind of shot to a new level when he was in Cleveland. Again, he already had pretty good basketball IQ to begin with, good natural instincts. So I don't know. Maybe Cleveland Bron is the best LeBron James. He wasn't much different athletically either. I mean, he had those like chase down blocks and great finals performances. I mean, as well as his playoffs performances. You gotta give Bron credit for his performance in the playoffs. Yeah, the finals he might have came up short to the Warriors, but man, LeBron was phenomenal throughout the playoffs. He was so good, man, so dynamic or whatever. But I think Miami Bron was his physical peak. I think his athletic physical peak was Miami LeBron James. Um, even though all around maybe you say Cleveland Brown was like slightly better. So, as a whole, I would say that Miami team was probably LeBron's best team. But anyway, I talked enough about LeBron. So like I said, originally I kind of stopped at 8, but I was like, no, you know what? Let me just put two more in there, make it a top 10 list. So number 9, I put the Big Three Celtics. So not the current Celtics. The current Celtics still has something to prove. I think this current Celtics squad, they're really good. They're on the cusp of greatness. So in the next few years, we might be talking about as this current Celtics team with Tatum and Brown or whatever being the best Celtics team of all time. But right now, I think the Big Three Celtics with Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, that team was a force to be reckoned with. Yeah, they didn't win a ton of championships, and I think they went to 2, maybe 3 finals appearances in total. But they were like, when they came on the scene, the league knew they had a problem. First off, the East pretty much was like, they knew they had to get through them if they were going to get to the finals. And there was a good chance that Big Three Celtics was making it to the finals back to back multiple years while they were there, on their run. But there was a good chance they were just going to win the finals, because that was such a good team. They're not as good as some of the other teams on the list, but they were such a tough team. So in order to beat them, you had to like construct a better team. I mean, in my opinion, LeBron teaming up with Dwayne Wade had to do with that Big Three Celtics team coming together. Like, they formed their team before, Wade, Bosh, and Bron got together. The Celtics Big Three kind of pushed a bunch of other teams to try to make their own Big Three. So, Big Three came together in Miami that was able to, overthrow that Celtics team. But, man, they had to battle. That was a tough matchup in the East. They weren't going down without a fight. And, Celtics that Celtics team had a really good run for a little while. Rajon Rondo was such an awesome point guard. You know, Ray Allen was still like, you know, on the tail end of his prime and peak or whatever as a player. Paul Pierce definitely had a lot left in the tank. I mean, I'm sure if you ask Paul Pierce, he still got something in the tank today. You know what I mean? But Paul Pierce was just one of those guys that was like, he was a pure baller, man, pure baller, and just really tough. When I think about comparisons to like Luka Doncic, a lot of times I say Paul Pierce to me is like, he's a lot like Luka Doncic in my opinion, because he plays like at a slower pace, but he somehow just is like impossible to guard. Like he knows how to use his body, he knows how to position, he knows the angles. He can pull up little fade away, and it's just cash, man. Like Paul Pierce was nice. Not the most athletic dude, but just knew how to hoop. Was so good, so good in his day and time as a basketball player, and a little underrated, honestly. When you think all time, a lot of people don't really give Paul Pierce the respect he deserves. But man, Paul Pierce was like great. I mean, he just couldn't get it done by himself, so he needed to team up with some other players. And Kevin Garnett, man, another player that's like nice all time. He's one of the greatest players, for sure one of the top power forwards, one of the best bigs, one of the best defensive guys of all time. Like Kevin Garnett was a straight hustler, man, on both ends of the court, offensively, defensively. Kevin Garnett was amazing. So that team, man, you take them in their prime, at their peak, they're a challenge for anybody to beat. So big three Celtics, I put them on the list of the top 10 teams of all time. I put them 9 and 10th. Honestly, man, 9th and 10th could be reversed, but I put Hakeem Olajuwon's Rockets. You know, big Hakeem, the Dream, Olajuwon, man. He was nice back in the 90s. Like, he was another guy that was like a phenomenal two-way player, and a very, very dynamic big man. A guy that could really handle the ball at the center position. Had moves for days. Was strong, athletic, had good defense. But he had a nice touch, can shoot it a little bit, and like Hakeem was just nice. He was a force. He was a force to be reckoned with. He was a dominant, powerful big man in a big man's league. The 90s and earlier was a big man's league. It was an era of giants, and Hakeem Olajuwon was one of the smoothest, nicest, most talented and strong and athletic big men of that era. So yeah, I mean, he got some back-to-back wins. Now, mind you, it was right around the time Jordan retired, but I mean, Hakeem Olajuwon, I mean, he was probably there's a strong argument to say that he could have won against Jordan had they played. They didn't match up in the finals, interestingly enough. So it's kind of interesting to consider that. What if they did meet up in the finals? Would Hakeem Olajuwon Rockets beat the Bulls? Most people don't really kind of discuss that or debate that. But there's a case for them actually probably winning. I mean, they beat out Shaq when Shaq was in Orlando. And I forget the other matchup. I want to say it was the New York Knicks, maybe. Something like that with Patrick Ewing. Either way, the Rockets beat some pretty good teams, and as well as beat some teams along the way in their conference just to make it to the finals, and had some pretty consistent battles in the playoffs every year that Hakeem was on that team. So phenomenal player and a phenomenal team. So that concludes my top 10 list. Man, so that conversation took a little longer than I thought it was going to take, but I want to discuss something else kind of interesting, hopefully as quickly as possible. I'm looking at the time right now, and I don't want this video to extend too long, but I do want to talk about this as quickly as I can. So what I did was, as like an interesting thought experiment, I said, you know what? Is it possible to take those top 10 teams of all time and reconstruct a current team today that would be the current equivalent, or like nearly close to the construction of those teams? Is it possible to come up with a list of a list of players to essentially remake those teams? And I want to give some examples. I'm not going to go through all 10 because I'm sure due to time I'll be way over an hour. I kind of want to cap my podcast at right around an hour if I can. So, but just to give you an example, like I took Jordan's Bulls, and I wanted to reconstruct Jordan's Bulls using today's players. So I want to share this one example, and then I'll do another video where I'll go in depth with each team. So I'm just gonna give one for now, and then I'm gonna share one more thing right after that before I conclude this video. So starting with Michael Jordan. If you were to recreate that Chicago Bulls team with players from today, you'd have to take a player that resembles players from that team and try to, reconstruct the same lineup. What player today would you say is most like Michael Jordan? Now, I know there's a lot of people that would argue that there's nobody like Michael Jordan. And if you're just comparing greatness, maybe you would say LeBron James. Maybe you'd say, well, LeBron James is really, really great. LeBron James is basically Michael Jordan. No. So me personally, I want somebody that as closely as possible resembles their game, both from a stylistic way, a mentality way, who has that player's same sort of like mentality or personality as a player, as well as who physically closest fits a physical size description of the player. So that rules out a lot of players. You're not going with any big men. No power forward or center. To me, what I compare as a Jordan clone. And wing players, yes, I'm gonna pick people out of the 2 or 3 spot on the court: shooting guard, small forward, because those were essentially the physical position Jordan would play. And then I'm not picking point guards either. And then also, yes, Jordan is known for athleticism, especially young 80s Jordan. I mean, he was high flying, coming to the rim, jumping through the lane, dunking on people. So there's a lot of guys I think that could fit that description of high flying dunkers and stuff like that. But there's one player, in my opinion, that more closely resembles Jordan in every other way, and that's Jimmy Butler. To me, Jimmy Butler is the closest equivalent to Michael Jordan in today's NBA. Jimmy Butler physically about the same size as Jordan. I think Butler's just a little bit bigger. His game, both offensively and defensively, is not too dissimilar. Jimmy Butler lives a little more in the mid-range. He's a guy that has no problem with contact and attacking the basket. He'll get in the paint, get in the rim, and score at the rim. So Jordan was a rim scorer. I think Jordan's a bit more athletic than Jimmy's been, even in his prime. But Jimmy ain't far off athletically. Well, I mean, he's not far off. Let's say he's a step below Jordan for sure, athletically, especially young Jordan. But you could compare later Jordan, later 90s Jordan to Jimmy Butler. They're about the same athletically. And then two-way player. So Jordan might not have been the best defender of all time, but Jordan definitely hustled and played the defensive end of the court. His athletic peak, he was one of the top defenders in the league at the guard position. Hence the fact that he won a defensive player in the year. He's a multi-time steals leader, led the league in steals. Definitely was, had a bunch of all-time defensive selection, defensive first team selections. Defense. Jordan was gonna take the challenge on the defensive end to lock in defensively. Again, maybe not, physically or IQ wise the best defender, but he hustled hard on the defensive end and took the challenge of trying to lock people up on defense. So Jimmy Butler, similarly, Jimmy Butler might not be the best defender, but he's a solid defensive player. He's gonna try to lock you down on defense as well as put buckets on your head on the opposite end of the court. So two-way player as well. But I think the biggest thing is Jimmy Butler's will to win. I think Jimmy Butler has proven it on multiple occasions that he's a winner. He's proven on every team that he goes to that he elevates the competitive level of that team, and the fact that he's carried the Miami Heat to multiple finals appearances over pretty good teams in the East to make it to the finals. A team that was an underdog, a team that no one believed could make it there, and Jimmy Butler, off of sheer willpower, damn near alone, has been able to, his competitive drive and his nature is akin to Michael Jordan. So yeah, he's not an exact identical clone of Michael Jordan, but I think he's like a close comparison in today's NBA, and I don't think there's another player that quite in totality embodies the player of Michael Jordan. So I got Jimmy Butler. Next guy we got to talk about is Jordan's running mate. Jordan had Scottie Pippen. A lot of people don't realize Scottie Pippen was so great. He just is not recognized as much because he lived in the shadow of Michael Jordan. But Scottie Pippen was a phenomenal player, a much better defender than Michael Jordan. As much as Michael Jordan is credited on defense, he got a freaking defensive player of the year selection or award. He got awarded defensive player of the year, and yet the better defensive player on the team was Scottie Pippen. Think about how good Scottie Pippen was as a defender. He was locking down the best player on any team they faced. If Jordan couldn't do it, Pippen was. That's how good Scottie Pippen was. He was an all-around utility player. Could run the offense, facilitate and pass the ball, set his team up with assists, lock down on defense, and grab you a fair number of rebounds. Was constantly making big plays and hustle plays on the defensive end or anywhere on the court where they needed a stop or they needed a play, a possession. Scottie was going to do it. He was pretty much a Swiss Army knife, a jack of all trades. Scottie Pippen was really that. And it's tough to find a comparison in today's NBA. I mean, honestly, LeBron's not far, is kind of not a far comparison if you were to compare the two. But I'm not going with LeBron. The guy to me that I personally think resembles Scottie Pippen to me, even though there's a couple people you can choose from, the guy that I settled on was Kawhi Leonard. I think Kawhi Leonard is the closest comparison in today's NBA as Scottie Pippen. I think Kawhi could really do it all. Kawhi has at times been the number one guy on whatever team he's been on. But I think he would be a monster number two to a guy that really led the team, especially on the offensive end, and let Kawhi kind of just do a little bit of everything else. Honestly thought Paul George and Kawhi was going to be a really good combo together. They kind of proved not to be, and I think playoff P is just not playoff P. I mean, some people call him way off P, but I think he's missing something. He's missing something that would make him a better player. And definitely his Clippers runs, although he played pretty solid, I don't think that was Paul George's best years in the NBA. But nor could you argue maybe Kawhi Leonard, especially due to the fact that he's been injured most of the time. But you take a prime Kawhi Leonard pre-injury, like I'm talking about like uh, the San Antonio Spurs before he got injured, before he got traded. That might have been Kawhi Leonard's best years, where he was just dominant. Some people were looking at him as the greatest player in the league at one point in time, somewhere between the tail end of his Spurs run and the beginning of him playing with the Raptors. But well, I guess he only played 1 year, but that year that he played with the Raptors, I think that Kawhi Leonard is like I said, a close comparison to Scottie Pippen. He's just a guy that can do it all, can defend, can score when you need him to score, can rebound if you need him to rebound, can run the offense and play make if he needs to. Like, he can really, really, really do it all. I mean, if that's Robin to Batman, man, Batman got it made. Batman got it made because he got a guy that is a juggernaut behind him, backing him up. No wonder Jordan won all those championships. A lot of it has to do because of Pippen, because of Scottie Pippen was on the team. So Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard together, I think. Now, mind you, if you took Butler right now, I don't know if Butler right now today is prime Butler, nor is Kawhi Leonard prime Kawhi Leonard. So for this like imaginary scenario, I'm taking them at their prime, but I'm taking players that are currently playing in the current NBA. All right, so then I'm gonna go a little faster to fill out the rest of the team. Rodman, I'm going with Draymond Green. Draymond Green to me is the closest comparison to Dennis Rodman. If you took prime Draymond and combine him with Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, that is a strong, strong defensive team, while also being able to hustle play and get buckets on you too. So Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, again, all in their prime. Draymond Green. Then who's Ron Harper? I had a little tough time with this one. There's a bunch of people you could pick from. I won't say a bunch, but a solid handful of people that you can pick from. And I went back and forth between two guys, but I'm going with Jrue Holiday, prime Jrue Holiday. I know physically Ron Harper's a little taller than Jrue Holiday, so I could have just went with a tall guard, a tall point guard. But I like that Jrue Holiday is such a hustler on the defensive end. Ron Harper was a strong defensive guard. He was also a guy that could get you buckets, but wasn't known as like the best offensive player. He's really a little more known for his defense, but he could score too. You couldn't let him get loose, and he ran the point guard position and could facilitate and run the offense as well. So prime, Ron Harper basically, but I'm taking prime Jrue Holiday as like a Ron Harper. Now think about this team already. At the 1, you're talking about Jrue Holiday in its prime. The 2, you're talking about Jimmy Butler playing shooting guard. At the 3, you're talking about Kawhi Leonard as a small forward. At the 4, we're talking about Draymond Green, prime Draymond Green as like a Dennis Rodman clone. The 5th one is Luke Longley. Luke Longley is just a big, solid big man that is gonna defend the rim, block shots, grab rebounds. None too crazy or whatever. And there's multiple people that could be Luke Longley in today's NBA. Just in any run of the mill center that's about 7 foot can really be like a Luke Longley. The guy I chose just because I like him, and I think that he's a nice comparison to Luke Longley. I picked Ivica Zubac. I hope I'm saying his name right. But Zubac. I mean, Zubac's a solid center. Pretty traditional big. Can defend the rim. Can score at the rim as well. You know what I mean? He's a solid big man that you can't just leave him open in the dunker spot. He's gonna catch the ball, dunk it. You know. But he'll grab your rebounds, hustle, block shots, that kind of thing. So Zubac. And for these teams, I'm gonna go more in depth on each one of them in my next video. But for each of these teams, I didn't necessarily pick a 6-man. unless it was somebody that I thought was a really key contributor to that team. Um, Now the early '90s Bulls, they did have Horace Grant, so he's worth mentioning. But you everyone knows, that later '90s run, especially with Tony Kukoc. Kukoc was like a big key contributor to that team. Often came off the bench as the sixth man. The guy today, to me, that's like a close comparison to Tony Kukoc. Honestly, it's kind of between a couple of people, and I might change it by the end of this. By the time I do like the next thing that I'm gonna do after I present all the teams. But I pick Lauri Markkanen. So he's just like a big guy that can shoot. You know, a big man that can play the 3 or 4, can shoot the ball really well. Not really super good at anything else. But you know who else honestly might be a better comparison to Tony Kukoc than Lauri Markkanen? It might honestly be Franz Wagner. Um, Franz Wagner, or Wagner, whatever you want to call him. Um, that dude down in Orlando, he's nice. He's nice. Can score. He's pretty tall. Can shoot. He's fairly athletic for a European white guy or whatever. But yeah, he's nice. He's nice. Tony Kukoc was like that in the '90s. He was pretty nice. Pretty nice offensive player, and really hard to guard because he was like 6'10". 6'10", can move, pretty agile, could dribble a little bit, but was a phenomenal shooter. Just solid on offense, could hit threes. Tony Kukoc was nice in the '90s, but today's NBA, I think Franz Wagner might be the guy, man. I think he might be a better Tony Kukoc. But could you imagine that team? Could you imagine that that's the lineup? Drew Holiday, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, Draymond, Zubac, and Franz Wagner? I'm picking that team to win a championship, man. That sounds like a nice team, especially all in their prime, all healthy. You got to take a healthy Kawhi Leonard. But healthy Kawhi Leonard, no injury. I think they win a championship with that team. But anyway, I'm pretty much going to conclude this video. I'm going to say one more thing really quick. I don't know how I'm going to do this yet, but I want to, in another video, just answer a question that I kind of came up with, which is, what's the best route for a basketball player to make it to the NBA? And this is a pretty in-depth question, but I wanna basically sort of answer this in a hypothetical scenario where I tell a story of 3 players: a player A, player B, and player C. The way I wanna tell this story is that 3 different players have 3 different routes to the NBA, starting in high school, playing in college, and then finally getting to the NBA. College or college alternative, because one guy has kind of an alternative route. But kind of want to discuss, what type of team do you think they should play on in order to get experience in high school, at the college level, pre-NBA, in order to build up their skill level as a young player and make them the best player entering the NBA? Like what prepares them best to play at the professional level? So I kind of want to answer that question, and that might be a video all in of itself, but I'm proposing it now, and stay tuned for some future videos where I'm gonna kind of discuss my perspective and view on that, and I think it'll be a fun video. I'm gonna try to make it as entertaining as possible, but that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'll catch you guys in the next podcast. This is Mike. Peace out.